Look, I share your frustration. I had a cynical friend of mine who once suggested a bumper sticker. Republicans, we waste less. Not exactly a banner to march into battle on. Presidential leadership matters. With Reagan in particular, I think those figures are skewed because one component of it was rebuilding our military to win the Cold War. And I think that was qualitatively different. Number one, that's a core constitutional obligation of the federal government. And to win the Cold War without firing a shot was, I think, one of the greatest acts of diplomacy, of strength, of peace the world has ever seen. So that is a component of it. A second component, Reagan ran on basically three things. Standing up to the Soviets and winning the Cold War, cutting taxes, and reducing spending. He achieved two of the three. The third one, I think Reagan would have said by his own admission he didn't get nearly what he wanted, but one thing to keep in mind is at the end of the day, Congress controls the purse strings. And when you have a Speaker of the House like Tip O'Neill, even with Reagan pressing with all of his ability, the appropriators in Congress kept appropriating. I'll point out the example you used of Bill Clinton didn't happen until we had a Republican Congress. And a Republican Congress matters a great deal. And in fact, it didn't happen until Republicans stood up and we had two partial temporary government shutdowns with a major showdown with Bill Clinton. And it was the Republicans in the House that dragged Clinton to cutting spending. And one of the most striking statistics, if you look at government spending, look, I wish the federal government had spent a lot less under George W. Bush. But what is particularly striking is if you look at the national debt or federal spending, not based on presidents, but on when Nancy Pelosi took over as Speaker of the House. And the last 2 years under Bush, spending and the debt skyrocketed like crazy. And I think an awful lot of that can be drawn to the impact of Democrats controlling Congress. Now, I will say also, all of that being said, 2 weeks ago I had an exchange with a senior senator of the Republican Party on the floor of the Senate, who in the debate over the debt ceiling, I was urging that we should not send the budget to a conference committee which would allow, under procedural rules, the Senate to raise the debt ceiling using just 50 votes, which would mean the Democrats could do it on straight party line votes, shut the Republicans out, and it would mean we would borrow trillions more while doing nothing to fix the structural, economic, and fiscal problems. And a senior Republican responded by standing on the floor of the Senate and saying, "Don't you trust Republicans?" And my response, I said, the senior senator has asked and urged us to trust Republicans. Let me be very, very clear. I do not trust Republicans. And I don't trust Democrats either. It has been leaders in both parties who have gotten us in this mess. But it's part of why I'm encouraged. Listen, I agree with you that I think the left has pushed like crazy for out-of-control spending, out-of-control debt, out-of-control taxes, and sadly, too many Republicans have been complicit in this. When we voted to jack up taxes on small online retailers, a whole bunch of Republicans voted along with the Democrats. But part of the reason I'm encouraged is I think we're seeing leaders who are willing to buck their own party. And that's coming from the grassroots. Look, every one of us who's bucking our own party, frankly, weren't supposed to win our races. In every one of the races, there was someone else who had been chosen by the graybeards to be the nice, safe choice to come to Washington and not rock the boat. And what we saw starting in 2010 with Rand Paul and Mike Lee and Pat Toomey and Marco Rubio was leaders who astonished the political power brokers and won with the support of the grassroots. And I think that's some of where you get the courage to stand up and say, stop bankrupting our country. And that gives me encouragement that that leadership in turn will move the conference, and I hope ultimately the Senate and all of Congress. All right, let's do one final.